Governor Kemp, I know this is an extremely busy time for you and your team. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Brad.
My first question is something we saw on television just a few short days ago. Everybody was anticipating this late afternoon news conference. They thought you were going to shut down the state of Georgia. You did not. Why didn't you shut the state down, and are you still okay with that decision?
Oh, perfectly okay with it. I, never had that on the radar at that point in time. I mean, that's certainly an arrow in the quiver I have left if we need it. I've done a lot of research, following a lot of data, talking to the medical professionals at the Georgia Department of Public Health and many other individuals, and I didn't feel like we were ready for that. In other countries that I followed, it didn't necessarily work when they did that. In some ways, it made the problem worse by basically quarantining families, forcing them to be together in their homes or apartments, and all of them ended up getting infected by a family member that had the virus, and then they went to the hospital, and then it made the problem worse in some regards. So all the people that say that's the only solution to the problem, they're not really being forthright in looking at what happened in other countries and what the rates were, the infection rates and other things, and that's what I'm doing every day. But Brad, I gotta balance the needs of the whole state. Every community, as you well know, is a lot different from others around the state, depending on where you are, whether you're a great area like the CSRA, or if you're in Middle Georgia or South Georgia, or you're the city of Atlanta, or you're a small town like, I was talking to some elected leaders in Hazelhurst, Georgia, and Jeff Davis County today. They don't even have a case yet, and they're trying to figure out whether they need to shelter in place or not. So, I took action that's based on statewide. I'm supporting the communities if they want to do more than that, depending on what the situation they have, where they are. But we also got to look at the consequences of the hardworking Georgians out there. We start putting more people out of work, it creates revenue issues for the cities and for the counties and for the state, and more importantly for those individuals that are worried about buying their groceries, their medicine, and keeping a roof over their kids' heads. And I have great appreciation for that. We literally could have people losing everything they've worked their entire career for.
Yes, sir.
And I don't think we need to do that right now. I think our citizens can stand up and fight this thing by doing social distancing, by cutting down on large gatherings and events, which I took action on. Unfortunately, there was a lot of bars and nightclubs that didn't heed the warnings and didn't social distance, and people were packing in there, and we've done something about that and closed them down, and that's not something I take lightly. I did not want to do that.
Well, Governor, what do you think about what Mayor Bottoms did in Atlanta just a few hours after your news conference? She issued a stay-at-home order for the state capitol for the next couple of weeks. Should we look at Atlanta as different than the entire state of Georgia as far as the concentration of people and maybe warranting a different response for that city?
Well, look, I support Mayor Bottoms. I talked to her several times on Monday before she did that. She's part of my task force. She gave a report today on our task force call dealing with the homeless and displaced. I mean, that's a big issue you've got to deal with here in Atlanta. But if you look at the order and you take out the exempted businesses, the critical businesses that have to stay open and running, and other things that you can still, go out and walk on the belt line, I just wonder, that to me is not a true shelter in place. It's not a true lockdown. There's still a lot of people moving around, which I support her doing that. But I think, where I live, Athens, Clarke County passed a shelter in place, but they're not enforcing it. So it sounds good politically, and I'm sure that when people in your TV network over there hear that, they think, well, boy, they're really taking action. But when you look at it, they're not doing much more than we are. Dr. Birx, that's on the coronavirus task force at the federal level for the president and for Vice President Pence, said one day it's going to be the community that stops this, just like they did with AIDS and HIV. There is no cure right now for the virus. There is no vaccine. Hopefully one day we'll have that. So when we have to deal with this again, perhaps next year, we'll be ready to knock it in the head. But right now, we're going to have to deal with a lot of people getting this virus.
I know that you I'm sorry for interrupting, Governor. Go ahead.
For most people, that's very mild and they can handle it. But for the medically fragile, we got to keep them inside. And for elderly people, we got to keep them isolated from the population. And that's why I did do the shelter in place for that specific group of people.
Governor Kemp, take me behind the scenes quickly when you have these meetings with the CDC, of course, which is right there in Atlanta, and when you meet with President Trump, Vice President Pence, and the task force. Is there anything in those conversations, is there a specific moment where you know that when you hang up, you're doing the right thing for Georgia, that it reflects the national mission? Is it a point during the conversation where the president or vice president says, Governor Kemp, you're doing a great job, or is it just an overall feel that you're determining that this is how Georgia needs to proceed?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, the president, vice president have told all the governors they appreciate what they're doing. They're working with every one of them. I would let our citizens in the state know that the president and the vice president, when we've had the calls with the nation's governors, whether the press was there or not, they have answered every single question that has been asked from every single governor that wanted to ask it. And some of those have been very pointed and tense questions, I can tell you. I had a great conversation with them the other day about block granting money back to the states to help us with a decrease in revenue that we're seeing with this, drastic economic drop. I've been told that was in the Senate bill that passed today. I certainly would urge Speaker Pelosi and the U.S. House of Representatives to go back to work and pass that bill. I'm not sure why they left, but they've also supported the governors making the decisions in their states, whether it's a state like New York or California that's doing shelter in place and quarantining, or whether it's states like Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida that haven't gone that far yet and are trying to strike the balance. It's different everywhere, and that's the same approach I'm taking with the locals. But they know I'm here to support them as well, Brad. We have a problem down in Albany. There's no secret. We got a lot of resources down there helping the hospital and the local community. And I talked to the chairman down there, Cahias, and I said, do you need me to come in and do an order to lock this thing down and help you guys? He said, Lord, no, don't do that. Our people would not take that the right way. We can handle it. We just need you to support us. We need you to send some public health people here, and we need you to help us with our hospital surge and with a place to quarantine people that may have been exposed, but they're not positive yet, or they have mild symptoms.
Boy, I sure hope so. Governor Kemp, what would you say to small businesses? I know you're seeing it statewide. We certainly are seeing it here in the Augusta area. Small businesses with people who are terrified that their businesses are over. Can you offer any hope for those folks that maybe they can be made whole when this is over? And if so, how? Is it just writing a check? How can we help them get back?
Well, I would be disingenuous if I was telling people, yeah, we can make you whole, because I don't have we have to balance a budget in Georgia. We can't deficit spend like they can at the federal level. I do believe, and I take the president and the vice president for their words, that they're going to get help. They're going to get help to working Georgians that are getting affected by this by no fault of their own. I certainly support that. I've been working the Congress and our two senators, Perdue and Loeffler, hard on getting that bill passed, and they did that, and I certainly am appreciative of that. We need to get the House to act now. But I can tell those small business owners this, and those working Georgians this, that I'm fighting hard for you, but you got to do what we're asking, and we're going to be fighting hard to have this economy as good as it's ever been when we get through this, and we're going to continue to work with you through these tough times, and I know our president, our vice president is going to do the exact same thing.
What about the supply chain? I go in the grocery store every other night just to survey things, and there are a lot of empty shelves. What can you say to Georgians about those trucks rolling, getting everything they need, bread, toilet paper, you name it, on those shelves again? Because I know there's officially not a shortage.
No, there's not. It's mainly, I think, more of a hoarding going on by some of our folks that quite honestly have become panicked because of the 24-hour coverage that we see. I want to continue to tell people that, look, this is a scary thing that we're facing, but we don't need to be afraid. We got great people on the front lines fighting this every day. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to beat this virus. This virus is not going to beat us. There's no need to go out and buy, 3 or 4 packages of toilet paper, or the last 10 boxes of chicken fingers. get what you need to supply your family for several days or a week, and then leave some for your neighbor. The supply chain is working. We're going to keep it working. That's one of those things that you just can't shut down. We've placed executive orders to speed that process up and to lift weight limits and other things to move the supply chain. Our retail establishments and our grocers are working that out to make sure that happens. So, if we get to having a problem with that, we'll let you know. But right now, we don't have that. I don't see that coming in the future. And that's one reason we got to keep things rolling in Georgia and can't just shut everything down.
President Trump in recent days has said that he hopes, I need to emphasize that we can start to see some progress on this thing by Easter. Do you interpret that, and I know you talked to him directly, do you interpret that from President Trump as a signal to take our feet off the gas pedal right now and start to maybe relax a little bit? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, we still need to stay diligent 24/7 to fight this, right?
We do, but let me just say this. I love the president's optimism. I think him giving the American people hope is exactly what we need. Before he said that, nobody had any idea when this was going to end. And it may not end, on Good Friday or Easter Sunday. It may take another week. It may take another month. But I'm glad he's optimistic and we can see an end in sight, because Americans and these practices, we're in the middle of their 15 days to stop the spread that the vice president's talked so much about. We're in that fight with him. If people will practice social distancing, if they will not go to large events and events where there's over 10 people, if they will look after and protect their elderly and keep them out of the public for just a few more weeks, we can flatten the curve, we can beat this thing, and then we can look at opening our economy back up and putting our people back to work. When exactly that is and how it looks like, we got to listen to the scientists and watch the data. And I know that's what the president's doing. So I certainly support him in his optimism, but also know at the end of the day, he's got a lot of really smart people around him from the economic standpoint, but also from the science standpoint. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Bretz are just brilliant people. I talked to Secretary Azar yesterday. There is a full court press at the federal level. They have our back, and I certainly appreciate the inordinate amount of time that we've had with them so that they understand what's happening on the ground in the states of this country and what we need.
I have to put in a question for my high school senior son and all of his friends, class of 2020. We saw South Carolina's governor cancel schools through the month of April. He recently made that decision. And so you have this class of 2020, these high school kids who were born during 9/11, and then they try to graduate during the coronavirus. At this point, and I know it's early, do you have any hope that those kids are going to go back to school even for a couple of weeks?
Well, I definitely think there's hope there. I'd hate to say that that's the plan. I had a great call with a bunch of educational leaders and school superintendents around the state yesterday that represent a lot of those groups. We had a very frank conversation about, whether we should go back at all. When we went back, what that would look like. I'm looking at that timing right now. We'll probably be making a decision here pretty soon so that they can start to prepare for that based on the information that I got from them and what we're dealing with. But I do think there's a chance we could come back, but I also don't want people to, put that in stone. There's a chance if this thing lingers longer than we think, we may not get them back. So I'm encouraging them to continue to do their distance learning. I would encourage your son to do that as well. I'm doing that with our high school junior, making sure she's getting her work done and continuing to learn and be ready to go to the next level.
Listen, I'm going to play that part of the interview back for him over and over again. Just a couple of quick questions for you, Governor Kemp. First of all, what's it like in your house? What are you and your family doing to get through this? And are you practicing everything you preach? I'm sure you are.
Well, I'm proud to say that I made a great comeback late last night. It was after 9 when I finally got home. We got off our 8 o'clock update call. We're doing 2 of those a day, 10 in the morning and 8 at night. And I played our youngest daughter, Amy Porter, in chess and successfully won that battle last night. So we're doing like a lot of families and doing some board games. But I can tell you, Brad, I haven't been at the mansion too much. Marty and the girls are holding the fort down for me. We've been working 24/7 on this one this is, I think, day 32 for me of the coronavirus response.
Well, I know that a lot of families throughout Georgia are rooting for us all to get through this. Listen, I have a last question about the Masters, and I don't want you to try to predict what Augusta National Golf Club is going to do. None of us would do that, but just as a sports fan and a fan of what that event means for our state, your thoughts on trying to play the Masters before this year is over?
Well, I'm certainly pulling for Buzzy and Chairman Ridley to make that happen. I know they want to. I've had great conversations with them during the decision-making process to, ultimately postpone the event. I know that is a grueling decision, not only for Augusta National and them personally, but for a lot of business people over in the Augusta area. So I hope they can get that rescheduled. We'll be supporting them any way we can. That's a great event. Really one of the best events and something our state is known for, and it's just great having it in that area. And I believe they'll get it done. I'm pulling for them, and they know how to get me if they need me to help them in any way.
Well, a lot of people are hoping that happens as well. Governor Brian Kemp, again, I can't thank you and your team enough for making this interview happen, and wish you all the best going forward, sir.
Thanks so much, and social distance, everybody. Help us out.